on the street, word on the street. Talk politics, current events, relationships, movies and flicks. Word on the street, word on the street. Word on the street is we be staying on topic with sports news and the movies. Anything that just happened. Special guests with that Drake Swift, Savage Kitty and Alex, aka the Sports Mouth. Storytelling what's happening. Chop it up with you Saturdays. No better way to start your day. Kick it with you on Mondays in case you really got something to say. If not, we'll catch you on Wednesday. Put the spotlight up to your face. Yeah, you know how we get down. Tell them tune in or get out the way.
Welcome. Good evening. Good evening, Neil Gordon, author, writer. I got the book right here, The Big Tuna, Joe Batters. So tell me a little bit, good evening and welcome to the show on Word on the Street. So tell me a little bit about who you are, what made you get into this. I read it. I thought it was pretty awesome. I didn't know who Tony Accardo was. I heard of the Chicago outfit, of course. You always hear definitely of, the most famous Chicago boss of all time. But you never heard of this guy. So I had to definitely, do my background, check it out, look at what he basically brought to the Chicago outfit. I love your back. You said this guy was kind of the real godfather of it all, right? He
Yes.
orchestrated the entertainment business. He orchestrated of hits. He was involved in all spectrums of the commission all the way up to, until he passed. So tell me who you are, Neil Gordon. Once again, thanks for coming on the show. Welcome to Word on the Street.
Well, thank you for having me. I saw The Godfather movie in 1972 when I was a senior in high school.
Okay.
At the old Cine Capri Theater in Phoenix.
Oh, wow.
And I was just hooked. I loved The Godfather. Number 2, I read all the books. I saw all the movies, Goodfellas, Casino, etc.
Right.
So it was just a hobby for me. And I was just fanatical about what was true in The Godfather and what wasn't.
Right.
And then 15 years ago, I was visiting my great uncle's house in Nova Scotia.
Nova Scotia, Canada. Okay.
In Nova Scotia, Canada. And that's where my dad's from. We were on vacation. He wanted to see this house that he'd remembered from a kid. And there's a tradesman working on it.
Mm-hmm.
And that was Stephen. His father was Tony Accardo. Tony Accardo was the Chicago mob boss. So
Right.
I became friends with Stephen. I had never heard of Tony Accardo at that time.
Right.
And so we became friends and we worked on the book for 10 years together. Evidently, Tony Accardo used to go tuna fishing in Wedgeport, Nova Scotia.
Right.
So one of his nicknames was the Big Tuna.
Yeah.
So there's one major picture of him with a 550-pound tuna in Wedgeport. And that was in one book, and it's Bill Romer's book, who wrote Accardo, the Genuine Godfather, like 40 years ago.
Okay.
Stephen saw that picture and he recognized his mother standing right next to Tony Accardo.
Mm-hmm.
And as plain as day. And that's how we figured out this whole story.
Wow.
In fact, 2 years ago, I sold books at the Tuna Wharf in the Tuna Museum for the International Tuna Festival.
Right.
Which was a hoot. So at that time, I'd never heard of Tony Accardo.
There's the picture that you were referring to.
Yes. And his mother is right over his right shoulder. So my dad had written 4 or 5 books, and he was always taking me to writers groups, over the years.
Right.
Well, I asked Stephen if I could write the book, and he was a voracious reader of everything.
Right.
And most of my research went online, and that's how the whole project came about. So,
Okay. So I gotta ask you some questions. And
yeah.
the reason why, because you said you mentioned Nova Scotia. I watch a great TV show that's on the History Channel. It is of course, the Money Pit, right? Oak
Yes,
Island.
I know exactly where that's at.
Yeah. So as you say you went there and all that. Did you do any digging? And I don't mean to take you off this topic, but did you do any research or trying to see, hey, where's this gold at that everybody's saying?
No, that was completely different. I happen to know where the ferry was that goes out to Oak Island,
Okay.
and that came up basically after I was working on the book. But
Yeah, there's a show called I think Digging for the Money Pit, and it's they're called the Lagini brothers, and they're actually from Michigan, and they're trying to solve the mystery now. So just curious, because when you said Nova Scotia, I'm like, wow, I would love to go to Nova Scotia. So you started working on this book, and it took you about 10 years. In that 10-year process, in that discovery and research, what did you find? Were you shocked of all the different stories trying to put this book together?
yeah, I was amazed. Tony Accardo, I'd never heard of. When I first met Stephen, I thought, maybe we can get 4 or 5 chapters. But
Right.
by the end of it, there was information I just couldn't put in. It was just a wealth of information.
Right.
And, Tony Accardo, let me explain why I called the book Joe Batters.
Right.
There's a famous movie, The Untouchables.
Correct.
And there's a famous scene where Robert De Niro plays Al Capone.
Correct.
And he gets up in the middle of dinner and he beats to death a guy with a baseball bat.
Correct.
Well, in actuality, that was Tony Accardo that swung the bat. And Al Capone yelled out, "This kid's a real Joe Batters." So gangsters go by nicknames. Tony Accardo went by Joe Batters or Joe or JB his entire life. So that's why I decided to call the book Joe Batters.
So that scene, if I've seen Untouchables many, many, many times.
Yes.
So that scene is probably one of the better scenes in that movie, where you see Al Capone smashing the head because the guy basically forgot to pay the cops off. How loosely was that based on Joe Batters? How loosely was that he smashed that guy's head with a bat? Was that pretty?
Yes, that part was accurate.
That part was accurate.
There were 2 capos that Al Capone had, and they were trying to set up their own distribution company, and Al Capone found out. And this happened maybe 2 months after the St. Valentine's Day Massacre.
Okay.
Tony Accardo was one of the shooters in the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. And it was just 2 months later, they had the scene at this hotel. And Al Capone consolidated his power by getting rid of these guys.
So that was the ultimate betrayal, right? To portray a Godfather, step out and say, "Look, I want to start my own thing, and let me cut out Al Capone." So he basically gets his muscle to say, "Hey, you know what? Let me take care of these guys."
Yeah, the accuracy of the scene. Al Capone gets up and starts a speech,
right?
And he actually picks up this baseball bat and he hands it around the table so people can see it. And when it gets to Accardo, he picks it up and he starts beating to death these 2 guys. And there was one other guy that was beat to get to death also. That was kind of a supporter of those. So that was all accurate,
Right. So you mentioned the St. Valentine's Massacre. So many different guys say they were there. They were the hitman in different various books.
Yes.
Was this pretty accurate that he was one of the trigger mans at the St. Valentine's? Because I know they really never said they, could have been 4 or 5 guys. Nobody really ever admitted to it. A lot of times they talk about it in different books. Oh, yeah, I was there. I was one of the trigger man. Was this actual concrete evidence that Joe Batters was one of the trigger man?
Yes. Well, I got to know a Cook County crime commissioner, and he had spent 30 years examining the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. His name was Art Bialik.
Okay.
And he ran the Cook County Crime Commission for 50 years. He spent 30 years going over tape recordings, mobster interviews, taps, newspaper clippings, and other interviews with other gangsters and police officers. And in 1990, he came to the conclusion that Tony Accardo was one of the shooters. Bill Romer, in his book, he said there was another set of shooters brought in, but I tend to believe Art Bialik's because it's the most credible answer which I received. So
for some of our young listeners, explain what the St. Valentine's Massacre was. It was basically to get rid of. So they were the outfit of which they were called later, but Al Capone was trying to consolidate the north side and the south side, if I remember,
yes.
Because they were in disputes with who controlled prohibition at that time, who controlled the alcohol. So I believe, if I remember, Jaime Weiss was on one side, Al Capone was on another. And
no, it was Bugs Moran.
Bugs Moran. Okay.
Yeah. Jaime Weiss had been killed by then.
Okay.
Bugs Moran was in charge of the North Side gang.
Right. And Al Capone had the South Side, correct? Yeah.
Now, one of Al Capone's capos was Jack McGurn, known as Jack Machine Gun McGurn.
Right.
Now, he was the mastermind behind the massacre. Now, it was to consolidate the families in Chicago, get rid of the North Side. Everyone would be under Al Capone.
Right.
George Machine Gun McGurn, he planned it. He basically had policemen come in for a photo shoot. And the gang, the North Side gang, they just got up against the wall, and it was a typical photo shoot for the press.
Right.
And they let them have it. Kind of a side note, the Tommy guns used, McGurn instructed one Tommy gun to use a drum mag and one to use a stick. And that's because the drum mags were prone to jam.
Oh, wow.
Accardo used the drum. You don't want to be machine gunning down a bunch of guys and have it stop in the middle. So that's to what the explicit instructions were. They mapped out the whole 4-block area of it was a carriage garage where they were at. They mopped everything out. They had cars waiting to block police and everything else. They spent 3 or 4 months on this, planning it.
On this caper.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and of course, Al Capone was at his Palm Island retreat. In fact, he was brought before the solicitor there at the same time as the massacre. So he had of course, he had an alibi.
Right. And he
probably
knew exactly when
Machine Gun McGurn was shacked up in a hotel with his girlfriend. They called her the Blonde Alibi.
Oh, wow.
So no one ever went to jail over it. So
right. Nobody ever went to jail. And I think they have it as an unsolved mystery, correct? Just because they never locked anybody up for it.
Yep. Well, I cover maybe 50 to 60 murders in my book. They're all unsolved. With the mobsters, they all covered their tracks. The only murder in my book, which you can confirm, is Jack Ruby when he shot Lee Harvey Oswald, because it was on national TV.
Correct. So yeah, he he had technically had the smoking gun, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, and the cops mobbed him right afterwards. So, so as little as, and I don't know how old Joe Batters was during the St. Valentine's massacre.
he was like 22.
22, so he was a young guy.
Yeah.
Pretty much, Al Capone basically said, he was his muscle. Hey, do whatever I tell you to do. Eventually, he rises up into the ranks, correct?
Yes.
And in the Chicago outfit, you got now the commission after Prohibition. You have all these powerhouses from the New York Five Families to the Chicago mob, all the way down to St. Louis, and basically controls this country. And a lot of people are unaware of that, but they controlled from labor to constructions to many businesses, and they work behind the scenes. So he rises up. And when does Joe Batters basically take the helm of the Chicago outfit?
Well, the St. Valentine's Day Massacre was 1929. Al Capone went to prison in 1931 for income tax evasion. Correct. And he died in Alcatraz. He had syphilis, uncontrolled, and Frank Nitti took over, and Paul Ricca after Capone went away. Okay. And in 1943, there was a Hollywood extortion trial where Nitti was in charge of extorting the motion picture industry. Okay. Anyway, they all got busted. Nitti ended up committing suicide.
So I was blown away when I read that in your book, because I didn't know Nitti committed suicide. Because if you watch Untouchables, you see that what's the name throws him off the roof, which I know that was false. Yeah. But for a mobster, has any mobster ever committed suicide?
That's the only one. And there was a montage in The Godfather of when Michael killed the cop. Right. In the restaurant, there was a montage. The guy who laying next to the railroad fence was actually the picture of Frank Nitti, but he was claustrophobic. And then Paul Ricca, who was Accardo's mentor, he was sent to jail. And Accardo was in Chicago. He had a nose for these things. He stayed away from them. So he was acting boss from 1943 to 1992 when he died. And that's 50 years. When Ricca got out of jail, he ended up to be his consigliere. Okay. And a guy named Murray Humphreys came up through the ranks, and the three of them really ran the Chicago outfit. Now, Chicago had one family. New York had five, and they were always fighting. So Chicago is by far the most powerful. So.
That's a pretty good insight. Yes, because when you think of the five families, it was always a power struggle, right?
Yes.
So who to take control, who this, who that. You had old man Gambino that controlled the family from the 50s, after Appalachian, until Gotti took over, right? Or actually until Big Paul took over and Gotti assassinated Big Paul. But they were constantly fighting. Who was the boss of all bosses, right? And in Chicago, you really never heard that. You did it in the early days when they were fighting the North Gang and the South Gang, right? But after the consolidation, they really weren't fighting, correct?
Yeah. Well, Lucky Luciano had a solution, and that was a commission.
Right.
He looked around. Him and Meyer Lansky were best friends coming up.
Right.
And Lucky looked at all the New York families and said, this is nuts. So they set up the commission, which was the heads of the five New York families, the five boroughs, and Chicago and Detroit. And those seven sat on the commission. And that it was to look at territorial disputes and not going around and killing each other. Also, they came up with Murder Incorporated, which was the strong arm part of Cosa Nostra, which was a bunch of Jewish and Italian mobsters. So that was his. They always think that Lucky Luciano was the brains of organized crime. Him and Tony Accardo, I think, had equal greatness as far as that was concerned. But
so you talked about the corruption that would happen in the early days of Hollywood. If I'm jogging my memory, wasn't Mickey Cohen the boss out in Hollywood? Did him and Tony Batters did they rub elbows together, or did they get along?
Well, the outfit, Tony Accardo, all the territories west of Chicago were deemed outfit territory. So
Okay.
Tony Accardo was the head of everyone out west.
Okay.
Mickey Cohen, when Bugsy Siegel came out west, and of course Bugsy Siegel, his idea was start the Flamingo Hotel in Las Vegas. And when he was caught absconding with funds, 3.5 million, that him and his girlfriend absconded.
Right.
Lucky Luciano versus Meyer Lansky gave the job to Accardo because he was over LA and Las Vegas.
So did Bugsy have to get the blessing from the commission, or was it more from Joey Batters to basically try to take over Hollywood?
Well, he was sent out to Hollywood. Bugsy Siegel, Ben Siegel, I mean,
Right.
was a wannabe actor. That's what he wanted to be. But,
Right.
he was very ruthless, but he was very public too.
Right.
You think about it, who are the most two famous mobsters of all time? I'd say John Gotti and Al Capone.
Right.
Now, both John Gotti and Al Capone were on the cover of Time magazine. So guys like Accardo said, that's nuts, and
Right.
Bugsy had that, he always had to be out with the celebrities and et cetera.
Right.
But he was under when the Flamingo opened, it was Bugsy Siegel was working on the hotel, and he didn't know how to design or construct a hotel. He kept firing construction companies and designers and architects and everything else.
Right.
And the project came in like $3 million over budget.
Right.
Well, at the time, Lucky Luciano was having his dictatorial in Havana called the Havana Conference, and it was the week before Christmas every year. And that's the famous conference Frank Sinatra sang at, and he brought a suitcase with $1 million from Hollywood to Havana. So anyways, at that time, they were monitoring the opening of the Flamingo, which they spent $4.5 million on. And Bugsy kept screwing up the opening. It was torrential rains. He kept changing the date. And he didn't know how to run the skim or the security. The first night, there's rival hotel owners took off with $100,000.
Oh, wow.
So it's clear that Bugsy didn't know what he was doing. Meyer Lansky, who was Bugsy's best friend, gave the order, and Accardo had a couple of his guys take him out. And he was actually hit in Virginia Hills, Beverly Hills mansion.
Right.
So, yeah.
And then Virginia Hill, I think later, if I remember, she committed suicide, or the mob got rid of her.
It's kind of shaky what happened to her. But I mean, she she
embezzled $3 million from the mob.
Yeah. But she was a trusted member. She would take money to Switzerland for, and she'd slept with all the mob bosses.
Right.
She was known as, the mob whore of the time. And
Right.
I think every top mobster she slept with. And, she was in front of the Senate committee once, and they asked her, I think it was DeCoffer asked her, why do all these high-level mobsters think so highly of you? And she says, do you know what the term deep throat means? And she was just real honest about it. And
Right.
but that was kind of the end of that scenario. She went to, I think, Switzerland and finished out her reign. But she was probably the top female mobster ever, you know,
Right.
in a way.
So you talk about a man that, you know, starts the life, you know, probably coming over from you know, Italy. The whole Costa Nostra actually came from there. Guys just basically brought it from the old country to the new country. A young guy, 22, finally raises up into the Chicago outfit. And I know that you said he pretty much controls the Midwest. He has Detroit. You got the Purple Gang, and he crows everything out west. I know you talk about it. Did he definitely have his hands in the disappearance of Jimmy Hoffa?
Yeah, I believe so. And
Okay.
I got my facts from FBI files. FBI has their files are called the Vault, where they keep all their top secret reports and interviews and everything else. And every so many years, they release some of them.
Right.
In 2011, they released information on Alan Dorfman's meatpacking plants. Now, Alan Dorfman was the protege of Jimmy Hoffa.
Okay.
And my analysis was that in the same way with the FBI was that the guys from Chicago went up to Detroit. They picked him up with Chucky, his son-in-law, Jimmy Hoffa, and had a supposed meeting with Tony Accardo back at the house. They kidnapped him. They took him back and they ran him through a meatpacker's plant.
And this whole thing that you know, I'm originally from Detroit, born and raised. So I hear, you know, they're constantly, oh, we found new evidence. We found new evidence. You know, there's been so much speculation. He's under Tiger Stadium. He's under Giant Stadium. I believe just what you just said. They assassinated him, or they basically put a gun to the head, blew his brains out, and he went away. And they did make, you know, like they say, ran his body through a meat grinder, and that's all they say, and that's it. So I don't think there's any bodies, any corpses, any skeletons left of Jimmy Hoffa. I think he is long gone.
Well, they did find some DNA in the back of his Chucky O'Brien's Cadillac. This is years later that Jimmy Hoffa was in the marquee, and that was and there's reports of Accardo's men picking him up at I forget the name of the restaurant there, and then he just disappeared. And unless you find some DNA someplace, but you know that Irishman that came out, I mean, that was debunked even before it came out.
Oh, the Irishman, the guy that said that he paints houses. Yeah,
that Shearer, you know, and people are always coming up with stories. Just like the JFK assassination too. I mean, you always have different takes on everything.
Well, I believe the mob had their hands in the JFK assassination, but I think there was somebody else that was pulling the strings. And I think you did talk about it in your book.
Yes.
I believe. So you got to remember, this is a guy that John F. K. ran. His father ran molasses with the Chicago outfit, if I remember, and the New York families. He ran, you know, he was a bootlegger. That's how he came to power. That's how he got his money. And he turned to the mob to get his son elected. Once his son got elected, they turned their backs on the mob, and the mob didn't like it. You know what I mean? That's
they felt betrayed. Bobby Kennedy hated the mob. He went after them.
Well, you got the trial of the commission, right? They take the mob on trial. But I didn't know, was Joey Batters part of that? I think it was like 5 or 6 guys that were indicted, and they went in front of the Senate and talked about the Costa Nostra. He wasn't on that because I know they had Fat Tony on there. They had Carmine Persico. I don't remember them having Joe Batters a part of that interview process.
Well, he always was interviewed, but one time he took the fifth 183 times in a row. So,
Oh, did
yeah. Tony Accardo would never say on a deathbed. He would take all the secrets.
Right.
With
Well,
him.
he was part of that regime, right? That Mustache Pete, the guys that are old school. That I love the movie Gotti, that one that they did for HBO. I didn't like the new one, but he made a lot of references, like old guy. He'll take it to his grave. I'm not going to say anything. I'll do 150 years. I don't care. But what happened was I want to say in 76, 73, you probably would know, the FBI came up with this thing called RICO. And it means up and down, everyone is indicted. It doesn't matter. It's called a criminal enterprise. And guys starting selling out for a bag of heroin because they're looking at 30 years. So they just would, you know what I mean? They would just rat on everybody, right? So a lot of those old Mustache Pete's guys, they take it to the grave. I'm not going to say anything. I'll do the time. I did the crime. I'll do the time, whatever the case may be. So a lot of those guys would just do the time. But a lot of and I think that is the fall of the current mob, right? A lot of guys would just turn you over to their mother for a quarter because they don't want to do the time. Yeah. So I think that's the biggest thing why the mob's always going to exist. I don't care what people say. The mob's always going to exist. But a lot of that stuff is because they're facing hard times with the RICO charges. Am I correct?
And it started with Joe Bonanno. And he wrote a book about Cosa Nostra affairs. Right. I think it's like a man of honor.
Right.
And
yep.
the FBI used pieces in that book to send all the heads of the 5 families to jail. And that's when RICO came up and Giuliani was, involved with that.
Attorney. Yeah, he was an attorney. So you have Joe Bonanno. He goes, I think he got tired, right? You had the Banana Wars, as they called it. Yeah. And he's fighting. You're fighting amongst each other's own family, right? I think it was I want to say it's his cousin, and I think it was involved, and his capos. Everybody turned on him, and you said that they come out with this RICO, and that means they indict everybody up and down. Yeah. And he releases his book. I seen the movie. He pretty much tells everything. I mean, it's all holds barred. No holds barred. He tells everything that he possibly can tell about the mob. I think Joe Bonanno was burned out with the mob. That's why he retired. He came to Tucson, Arizona with his son, Will. And they kind of run away from the 5 families, and that's the reason why, they had the banana split and all that good stuff. There's so many different things. Like I said, this is an awesome book. If you have not got it, get it now. I believe it's on Amazon. Am I correct?
That's on Amazon, Kindle, Audible, and it's so far. I just got my 400th review on Amazon and Goodreads, 4.2 out of 5 stars. So it's an excellent read. I worked 30 hours a week for 10 years on it. I put my heart and soul into it. So give it a shot. It's the best mob book you're
so much good stuff. So many gold mines in here. If you haven't got it, go get it. Joe Batters by Neil Gordon. Great book. I want to thank you for coming on. Can you let me see if I can find the link, and I'll put it in the chat, the Amazon chat. So hold on real quick.
Tony Accardo, joebatters.com.
Yeah, there it is. There, I found it right here. There it is. I found it. There it is. So Neil, where are you going to be? I know you said you're doing some book tours. Where are you going to be in the next coming weeks?
Well, I've been doing some gun shows. I've got a replica Tommy gun from the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. I'll be
Right.
at Tucson gun show April 30th and May 1st. And I'll be in Flagstaff on the 4th and 5th of June. We just had an Italian festival right downtown. Phoenix was fabulous. So any of those I'm usually at.
So once again, thanks you for coming on. I know I'm taking up your Wednesday. Once again, go get your book, Joe Batters by Neil Gordon. Great book. Thanks again. I appreciate it. I put the link in the thing. Go get your book. Go get it signed by Neil Gordon. Thanks for coming on, Neil. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Enrique. Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.